We weren't ready for what happened in tennis last week. Major upsets, a 17-year-old making history.
It's way long. It's the title for Mira Andreeva.
Double delight in Doha. Some messed up incidents on and off the court. And more updates on the Jannik Sinner suspension. Last week in tennis was crazy, and with so many major storylines on the ATP and WTA tours, I'm running it back with Liza West. Let's get to it. The field was stacked in Doha, and we had must-watch matches in the opening round. It looked like we were in for something magical, until Djokovic, Dimitrov, and Tsitsipas all crashed out in the first round. Tsitsipas's loss in particular must have been a real letdown for the Tsitsi fans because of how he lost. Deep into the deciding set, Medvedev got injured on the stretch while trying to reach a ball. After almost doing the splits, the 21-year-old was barely able to walk for the remainder of the match, but somehow managed to win the tiebreak 7-5 and beat Steph. Seeing Tsitsipas walking up to the net to shake hands with the player limping around on one leg was telling of a bigger problem. It seems like top players find it tough to play an injured player. And you only have to look back to January to see how Alcaraz couldn't take advantage of an injured Novak at the Australian Open. Why does this happen so frequently though? I think it comes down to a couple of reasons. Playing an injured player can be quite distracting. Seeing them constantly wincing or grimacing might make you think the match is a done deal. However, not long after, you see the injured opponent hitting incredible shots like they aren't even injured in the first place. It's almost like you don't know what to expect. This leads us to the second problem: change of strategy. So you came into the match with a certain strategy in mind, but because your opponent is down on one leg, you have to switch plans and abandon your A game in an attempt to move them around the court. For many players, a switch up like that affects their rhythm and they're just not able to do it as effectively. They start bleeding errors instead. The third reason players struggle to play someone injured is the element of surprise that comes with it. Because an injured player has their movement compromised, they start playing more aggressively and going for crazy shots. Again, this might throw you off your game because you really don't know what to expect from them. All of these problems lead us to the next point, which is the mental aspect of it all. For some players, the added challenge of facing an injured player comes with a certain pressure. You begin to feel like you shouldn't lose to someone injured, and that thought alone adds more pressure and can make you tight like we saw in the Alcaraz-Novak quarterfinal in Australia. Also, there might be some ethical component to this too. Some players might feel guilty about taking advantage of an injured opponent with drop shots, and they begin to start second-guessing themselves, and they end up playing down to the level that they feel their opponent is at. On top of that, there might also be a lack of know-how on playing opponents with different types of injuries. Shoulder, wrist, hamstring, elbow. I mean, no one steps on the court with the aim of practicing against a player who might actually be injured. It's not totally surprising to see that many players have an execution problem with their strategies when facing an injured player. I feel like Tsitsipas's embarrassing loss to Medvedev was a combination of all of this. Novak was beaten in straight sets by Berrettini in the opening round. It was Novak's first match since the leg injury he suffered at the Australian Open, so we weren't really expecting him to run everyone out of the building. The most important thing was to test his fitness and how well the injury had healed. Now, Djokovic said he felt no pain or discomfort during the match. However, his level wasn't nearly good enough to trouble Berrettini. The first set was close and went into a tiebreak. Berrettini, however, was playing at an extremely high level, and his forehand was doing all the damage as the Italian took the first set after almost an hour. The second set, though, was a lot more straightforward. Berrettini broke Novak twice to finish the match 7-6, 6-2 your final score. Novak's second serve delivery was particularly poor throughout the match, but more interestingly, I was a bit surprised to see Berrettini not get outplayed on the backhand exchanges. It goes without saying that Berrettini's backhand has seen some major upgrades since his return to full fitness. The slice is great, but he isn't just totally relying on it. Rather, he's hitting through his backhand with more conviction than ever. And when he has to hit a runaround forehand, you know it isn't coming back. As expected, the majority of Berrettini's 33 winners came off his forehand hammer. The reward for that? A first ever win over Novak on his 5th attempt, and a first top 10 win since 2023. The next wave of upsets came in the quarterfinal, with Alcaraz falling to Lehechka in 3 sets. Both guys played at a really high level as they shared the spoils in the first 2 sets. Alcaraz was up a break in the 3rd set and had the chance to go up a double break at 4-2, 40-30, but his return fell just short and Lehechka survived. From then on, it was a rapid shift in momentum for the 23-year-old Czech, who started to play more aggressively on the return. Alcaraz didn't win another game and ended up getting broken twice to lose the decider 6-4. I thought Lehečka put on a solid show to get his first top 3 win in the process. We've seen him play like a top 10 player in patches, but his body has just failed him on so many occasions in the past. For me, Lehečka's top 10 or top 15 prospects are almost totally dependent on his body's ability to withstand the grinds from the tour. Lehečka lost to Draper in the semis, but he'll still be proud of his early season form and his return to a career high of world number 22. For Alcaraz, however, there's a lot to talk about. Once again, one of his major shortcomings is the fact that he continues to lose random matches and just isn't as consistent as Jannik Sinner. Alcaraz was on a 7-match winning streak coming into Doha, but his performance against Lehečka was a bit of a mixed bag. Don't get me wrong, he defended well out of the corners and was destructive when he had the opportunity. However, his timing was off at times, and he couldn't handle the heat from Lehečka when the Czech hit ultra-aggressive mode midway through the deciding set. Now, some of you might be wondering if Alcaraz is ever going to have single-digit losses in a season. By comparison, Djokovic has had 10 seasons with single-digit losses. I think Alcaraz is going to get there at some point. But for that to happen, he's going to have to raise his floor to get to a point where he's consistently beating top 20 and top 30 players on autopilot. That'll come with more experience. Daniil Medvedev retired against Felix Auger-Aliassime due to illness in the quarterfinal. At first, we weren't sure what it was, but Medi cleared the air after and said he was suffering from food poisoning. It's probably why it didn't look like he was having any fun playing tennis. His body language looked off, and he wasn't even chasing balls at some point. For those of you wondering why Medvedev didn't shake hands with Felix at the net, it's literally because Medvedev was sick. As far as his game goes, I think this season is going to be make or break for Medvedev. He's probably the most vocal about how the court conditions, the balls, and how the surface speeds affect his ability to hurt opponents and play his best tennis. Now, it seems like he's going through an identity crisis in a bid to change his game style. In his comeback win over Khachanov, Medvedev switched rackets to help him create more pace on the ball, and he admitted that it's something he's been doing a lot more often recently. A question for you guys. If you were Medvedev's coach, what advice would you give him? Let me know in the comments. Shout out to Jack Draper for having an incredible tournament, coming from a set down to beat both Berrettini and Lehečka on his way to the final in Doha. It was his first time back after getting injured, but it didn't take him long to find his level. The final against Rublev was top class for the first 2 sets, and I thought both players used the entire width of the court to great effect. Rublev was cashing in on the wide serve on the deuce side, and was 17 for 18 for first serve points won in the first set. Draper, on the other hand, was adopting a more aggressive approach early on, and was looking to trouble Rublev with heavy shots and pace. In the all-important game at 5-6, Draper was serving to stay in the set, but a costly first double fault of the match, coupled with some errors earlier, brought Rublev to 3 set points. He converted the third set point with a forehand down-the-line passing shot after a tame +1 backhand approach from Draper fell into his forehand. In the second set, Draper adopted a more aggressive approach on the return and was using his forehand to create more damage. On the backhand side, he was also taking the ball early and redirecting it flat and hard. After saving a couple of break points, Draper broke Rublev in the 11th game and served out the set to level the score. Now here we were in the third set. Draper had run out of steam and was going for more desperate plays like serving and volleying on break point, coupled with some really poor forehand drop shots. On top of that, Rublev was able to handle Draper's slice second serve by taking the ball extremely early to win 6 out of 7 of Draper's second serve points in the third set. It was pretty much completely one-sided, and before we knew it, Rublev got a double break before serving out the match for a 7-5, 5-7, 6-1 victory. A word about Rublev. This time last year, he was defaulted from his semifinal match against Alexander Bublik in Dubai, and he went downhill from there with a physical and mental decline in his game before the redemption in Madrid. Rublev's mental struggles are something we've talked about a lot, and if there's anything that we can take home from his title win in Doha, it's the fact that the Russian has made huge progress in that department. But not in the way you might be thinking. There's still some negativity and temper tantrums when he makes a wrong decision or loses an important point, but what has changed a lot is the fact that his frustration doesn't boil over to a point where he crashes out and self-destructs. Rublev got rid of the antidepressants, consulted Marat Safin, who also had his fair share of on-court meltdowns, and also began working with a psychologist. All of this has helped him to be kinder to himself and more accepting of situations. Also, Andre has been pretty open about his willingness to improve and handle his emotional stress and intensity better, which is also a good thing. The third set tiebreaks against de Minaur and Felix, and the circumstances under which he won both matches, further showcase his overall growth. For the Russian, it's a first ATP title in 10 months, the 17th of his career, but only the first time that he's won a title twice. While a lot of the spotlight focused on the top seeds in Doha, Sebastian Baez was busy putting on a masterclass in Rio. Baez became the first player to successfully defend his title in Rio after beating Alexandre Müller in straight sets. His forehand and athleticism were on full display throughout the tournament, and opponents had a hard time dealing with that. In the final against Alexandre Müller, we saw the Frenchman throw everything he had at Baez, especially in the second set when he was clearly out of legs. However, the defending champion was up to the task, tracking almost every ball down on the clay and responding with a lot of venom off both wings. Baez's power is nothing short of impressive, and I'm surprised at how he's able to hit as hard as he does. I thought Baez did a great job tiring Müller out in the neutral rallies before unleashing huge inside-out or down-the-line forehands to end points. Baez ended the match with 26 winners, many of which came off the forehand. Let's talk about him for a second because his achievements seem to be going a bit under the radar. At 24 years old, he's now won 7 ATP titles, including 2 500s. And he did that from only 9 finals. Not a lot of top players can brag about that. Baez's best performances come mostly from the clay courts, as we can see from his win-loss records on other surfaces. But make no mistake, Baez deserves a lot of credit for what he's done at such a young age, and considering his physical limitations as a 5'7" player. No man has won more matches on clay than Baez since the start of the 2022 season. Sebastian's best performance at a slam is only a third-round appearance, and sometimes he goes on a long losing streak, but I think it's time we stop judging players based on their achievements at slams alone. Not everyone is going to win slams or make deep runs all the time, and as a matter of fact, many good tennis players won't win major titles. I think a better way to judge players might be how they're able to make the most of what they have, and I think Sebastian Baez has done extremely well in that department. Meanwhile, Alexandre Müller should be proud of his achievements. From beating Fonseca in the opening round to taking out 2 seeds in Echeverry and Cerundolo, and an equally impressive Francisco Comesaña in the semis, the 28-year-old Frenchman is no doubt living his best life. Müller only broke into the top 100 in 2023, so by the conventional standard, he's a late bloomer. He also has Crohn's disease, which I imagine is really tough for any athlete. Müller has always had good technique, and I think the confidence from his title win in Hong Kong and from beating good players to reach the final in Rio will give him the confidence that could lay the groundwork for his best season yet. Since you all loved the WTA coverage in last week's recap, we're doubling down, and I'm even reporting from right here on the ground in Austin. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our newsletter where we cover the latest from around the ATP and WTA tours and get into the topics that we don't have time to cover in the videos. I'll leave the link in the description for you down below. It was the second WTA 1000 tournament in a row in Dubai, and honestly, it didn't disappoint. Mira Andreeva beat Iga Swiatek and Elena Rybakina before taking down Clara Tauson in the final to become the youngest woman in WTA history to win a WTA 1000 title. The final against Tauson was tactical. Tauson got the early break after back-to-back double faults from Andreeva, but it didn't take long for Andreeva to shake off the nerves and settle into the match. Soon enough, Mira pulled back even to level the score. Both players continued to mix up the pace, spin, and height on the ball as the set went into a tiebreak. Mira raised her level and continuously drew out errors from Tauson by hitting super deep into the court.
But she knew when she'd hit that.
Watching the match, you would have noticed Tauson's compromised movement towards the end of the first set. She'd been dealing with an illness and had thrown up a lot coming into the tournament. And after playing 6 matches in 6 days, for the first time in her career by the way, her body could no longer bear the pain. According to Tauson, every inch of her body hurt. By the beginning of the second set, Mira had caught fire and she was absolutely ripping the ball off both wings. Her backhand winners more than doubled that of Tauson, and by the 4th game, Mira had gotten the all-important break.
And the break is relatively easy.
Before running away with the championship.
It's way long. it's the title for Mira Andreeva.
After coming through a week that saw her snag back-to-back top 10 wins and now becoming a top 10 player herself, Mira is going to have a chip on her shoulder. But she says she's ready for the challenge. Towson, on the other hand, is going to be very proud of her season so far. From winning the ASB Classic in January to reaching the semis in Linz and being the only player to beat Madison Keys and Sabalenka this season, and now to a second WTA final of the year, she'll have a lot of positives to take home. She had an insane tournament, needed 2.5 hours to get past Svitolina, beat Sabalenka in straight sets, and needed another 2 hours and 50 minutes to shrug off Karolina Muchova. What a year she's having. Unfortunately, we can't say the same for this next player. Something really disturbing happened last week during Emma Raducanu's match. Liza, can you walk us through it?
During a second-round match in Dubai, Emma Raducanu was visibly upset as a result of a man sitting in the stands who had earlier in the week exhibited fixated behavior towards her. He was quickly removed from the stadium, and while the match continued at a high level, it was clearly a distressing incident for Emma. The man was later detained by Dubai police and signed a formal agreement to stay away from Emma. He has also been banned from all future tournaments. The WTA commented on the issue, saying that they are actively working with Emma and her team to ensure her well-being and provide any necessary support. This isn't the first time Emma has dealt with a stalker. In 2022, a man in London was given a 5-year restraining order after loitering outside her family home, leaving unwanted gifts and letters, and even stealing items from their porch.
It seems like tennis isn't the only sport that's affected by stalking. And I'm not sure, but I wonder if these cases are underreported.
Unfortunately, stalking of high-profile female athletes happens far more often than we realize.
Just recently, US track and field athlete Gabby Thomas shared a video detailing how a group of 6 men found out her flight details and harassed her at the airport before she boarded. Coco Gauff commented on the video, revealing she has faced similar harassment and speculating that airport personnel might be leaking travel details. And it's not just in-person encounters. Athletes are also facing terrifying threats online. Teenager Mira Andreeva recently shared that at just 14 years old, she received a message after a loss stating, "Look around because I'm going to find you and I'm going to cut your arms."
Imagine receiving a message like that as a child, just for playing the sport you love. It is absolutely disgraceful.
Really disgraceful, but this isn't the first time. It's happened on quite a few other occasions in the past, hasn't it?
Unfortunately, stories like these are nothing new in tennis. History has shown that women have been at risk for decades.
Most infamously, Monica Seles was stabbed on court in 1993 by a man obsessed with her rival Steffi Graf. And Seles wasn't the last. Players like Martina Hingis, Sloane Stephens, Serena Williams, Katie Bolter, Marion Bartoli, Maria Sharapova, and many others have been targeted by stalkers. With the rise of social media, this issue is only getting worse.
Yes, I've seen so many times where players have complained about the hateful things that are said to them during and after tournaments. At the tour level, is there anything being done to address this?
Well, the WTA has made progress in recent years to keep players safe. They've strengthened security protocols at tournaments, enhanced player accommodations, and even introduced AI tools to flag abusive content online. They've also improved mental health resources to help players cope with the psychological impact of harassment.
But cases like these are so challenging because it's extremely difficult to enforce a spectator ban. Tennis is a global sport with thousands of fans attending tournaments every week. Without stronger ID verification for ticket buyers, how can they actually prevent someone from showing up again?
The responsibility to create a safer environment for players and fans isn't just on the WTA. It really is on all of us. So if you see fixated or obsessive behavior, whether it's online or in person, call it out. Your voice can help stop this before it escalates.
It's certainly the responsibility of the tour and also all of us here at these events to make sure that the players have a safe environment to work in. But in other troubling news, we had some developments on the Rybakina and Vukov story.
The Athletic published a new report this week, further detailing the WTA's decision to ban Elena Rybakina's coach, Stefano Vukov. It sheds more light on the 3-page summary sent to the pair by WTA's chief executive Portia Archer, summarizing the investigation's findings. One particular excerpt from Archer's letter stands out, outlining Vukov's violations of the WTA's code of conduct.
Engaging in abuse of authority and abusive conduct towards the WTA player, including compromising or attempting to compromise the psychological, physical, or emotional well-being of the player, engaging in physical and verbal abuse of the player, and exploiting your relationship with the player for further personal and/or business interests at the expense of the best interest of the player. The letter further revealed that Vukov had called Rybakina stupid and retarded and had been seen throwing balls at her during practice. Archer also links Vukov's mental abuse to Rybakina's deteriorating health, stating that the distress she experienced would sometimes manifest in the player as a physical illness. This is referencing Rybakina's increasing struggles with injuries and illnesses, and in particular her insomnia, which reportedly got worse ahead of their split. Archer's letter accused Vukov of harassment, citing that he had called her over 100 times in a single day before being removed by security after learning about Rybakina's decision to part ways with him. Archer also highlighted the power dynamics at play, writing, "You have cultivated a relationship of dependence, causing the player to believe that she cannot have success without your presence, when in reality, your success is dependent on her." She went on to say that his continued contact with her, despite the no contact order, without a doubt influenced and continues to influence the player's feelings around this investigation and its outcomes.
Archer's letter highlights that there is without a doubt a toxic relationship between Rybakina and Vukov. And given that historically the WTA has failed to safeguard players from abusive relationships, Rybakina's case shows that the WTA has learned from previous incidents.
What previous incidents are we talking about here?
For example, Pam Shriver revealed that she had an inappropriate and emotionally damaging relationship with her coach, Don Candy, when she was 17 and he was 50. At the time, the WTA had no policies addressing such power imbalances, and Jelena Dokic suffered extreme physical and emotional abuse at the hands of her father and coach, Damir Dokic, who repeatedly beat her, pulled her hair, and kicked her unconscious. Despite public outbursts and tournament bans, the WTA failed to intervene. Recognizing these failures, the WTA appointed Lindsey Brandon as Director of Safeguarding. This year, her work culminated in the introduction of the 2025 Safeguarding Code, which establishes clear guidelines for preventing abuse. The Rybakina case is one of her first major challenges, and how the WTA enforces its policies now will determine if real change is happening.
With reports that the two are now romantically involved, many fans are questioning whether the WTA's ban will have any real impact. Perhaps the most concerning part of this story is that while the WTA can ban Vukov from coaching, entering tournaments, player facilities, and venues, they can't ban Vukov from being in Rybakina's circle in other ways, whether that's as an agent, a business manager, or even her partner. This story is truly hard to watch unfold, and I'm just hoping that her family and fellow players can do whatever they can to support her in ways that are truly meaningful and create a safe environment for her.
Elsewhere, Venus Williams turned down a wild card given to her by the tournament organizers at Indian Wells, and I saw a raging debate on whether the 44-year-old should have been given the wild card in the first place. Venus hasn't played a match on tour since last year's Sunshine Swing, where she lost in the first round at Indian Wells and Miami. Moreover, she hasn't won a match since her win over Veronika Kudermetova at the 2023 Cincinnati Open. I don't know how I feel about this. If your name is Williams and you've done as much for the sport as Venus and Serena have, I totally see the merits in taking a spot at Indian Wells. But at the same time, if you look at the situation objectively, is it really worth it to use a wild card on a 44-year-old player who hasn't played on the tour when there are plenty of other young guns who are just waiting for their shot? Let me know what you think in the comments. Following Jannik Sinner's WADA case settlement, the BBC released an article detailing some of the things that happened behind the scenes. According to the BBC's report, Sinner's lawyer Jamie Singer was deep in phone calls with WADA's most senior lawyer late into the night of February 14th, and they entered into a case resolution. I should mention that case resolution processes have been in place for the past 4 years, and WADA has struck 67 of those settlements in the past. The article further states that WADA made 2 approaches to Sinner's team. The first attempt was rebuffed, but on the second attempt, Sinner's lawyers tried to convince him to accept the ban in what was a tricky situation. Sinner felt that since he was proven innocent by the first independent tribunal, why did he now need to accept a 3-month suspension? Singer's advice to Sinner was that one never knows what's going to happen at a hearing, and since WADA was pushing for a year, 3 months seemed like a reasonable deal to accept. Some fans have asked why Sinner hasn't come out and spoken about the ban in detail. But my response to that would be, if he did, would it really change anything? If Sinner goes to the press and spells out every single detail of his case settlement, would it change the minds of those who believe he was given preferential treatment? I'm kinda hung up on what would change if Sinner gives a press conference. His lawyers would probably be telling him to not engage anyone simply because it's not necessary. With respect to the convenience of the ban, though, it seems to me that WADA understood how solid Sinner's defense was and the risk of losing the case, so the convenience of the suspension might have been taken into consideration as part of efforts to make the Italian accept the ban. My guess is that if the dates for the suspension fell in a period where Sinner would be forced to miss 2 Grand Slams, he probably would have rather gone to court than accept the ban. Another takeaway I have from the whole Jannik Sinner situation is just how people interpret facts differently. 2 different fans could both read the same ITIA and WADA reports and still reach different conclusions. One saying that Sinner should serve more time, while the other saying he shouldn't serve time at all. That's how complicated things are. But what do you think? What do you think of the BBC article, and how do you think this ruling affects WADA's credibility moving forward? As far as ranking updates go, there were some pretty big changes. Rublev moves up to number 9, Draper hits a new career high and edges closer to a top 10 debut. Mueller takes a massive jump to number 41 after reaching the final in Rio, while the young Argentines continue to turn up the heat with new career highs. It's a top 100 debut for Jaime Faria following an impressive quarterfinal run in Rio. On the women's side, Mira Andreeva smashes her way into the top 10 after lifting her first WTA 1000 trophy. Andreeva is the youngest woman to reach the top 10 since Nicole Vaidisova in 2007. Clara Tausen's finalist points also earned her a new career high. Madison Keys, who hasn't played a tournament since the Australian Open, finds herself in the top 5, while Badosa falls out of the top 10. Anna Kalinskaya's ranking takes a hit as she now finds herself outside the top 30. Last week in tennis came with lots of action, but it gets even better this week. We have 4 ongoing tournaments, in Acapulco, Dubai, and Santiago on the ATP side, and in Merida and Austin on the WTA Tour. There's a lot of star power in the draws and plenty of big names to look out for. If you loved this video, be sure to like and subscribe. We have so much more coming your way here on Courtside Tennis. And also, let me know your thoughts on any of the major storylines or events we covered in the video. I'll be in Austin this week and California next week, so once again, if you're looking to get on court with me, drop your information in the comments down below or fill out the Google form, and I'll be reaching out to you to get on court. Until next time, keep going for the lines.